Greetings, writing art criticism students. Welcome to week number 4. I hope this video finds you well. Um, Better than how I'm doing. I had a bit of a rough week last week with my knee, with infection and frequent doctor's visits. All of that has conspired to keep me from being able to dig in and to respond to each and every one of your discussion prompts and your writings. And so I feel disconnected from you, and I deeply apologize for that. It's one thing when a semester, when you have 15, 16 weeks, but when you have 8 weeks, and especially with the material we have and the way I'm approaching this course and the necessity of my feedback and my desire to observe and to help you think through these texts and these really interesting but difficult ideas. It grieves me, and so I deeply apologize for these past few weeks, and I am looking forward to this week to being able to hunker down and to be able to give you the responses that your writing so richly deserves. My surgeon has prohibited me from traveling for the next few weeks, and I was planning to be in New York City this week teaching for King's College, which is what I do 3 times each semester, and I've had to cancel it. So I'm going to be home, which means I'll have more time and feeling better, and hopefully that I'll have long periods of uninterrupted time to be able to respond to you and to catch up. So again, I apologize. This week we are looking at the transition to a very different way of writing about art. And how art criticism is moving into a different direction. This is the transition that in this class that I wanted to track and to show you that how the writer who is chosen to write art criticism is approaching the work of art, and the writing is shifting and changing is very important, and it's necessary to understand in the context of how we understand modern art and how it functions socially and culturally. And so modern art and modern art criticism are inextricable because they work together. And so what you saw last week with Diderot, and Diderot's writing his reviews of the annual Salon exhibition in Paris, is the beginning of a public mode of art criticism, which begins as a philosophical journalism. Diderot is one of the great French philosophes, the bearer of the standard of Enlightenment reason. Wants to see in the visual arts evidence of a different way of approaching the arts that reflects a new age of reason and of morality. He sees the art. He sees painting. Previous generation of painting focusing on with allegories and the kind of romanticized Judeo-Christian illustrations of Judeo-Christian literature and classical mythology, as moving the viewer further and further away from reason and the clarity of a lived experience in the present. That is, in which painting can serve to not to intoxicate, but to sober up the viewer and to help the viewer become more socially responsible, individually responsible. And so Diderot approaches the visual arts as somehow a visual embodiment of those ideas. And so he goes to the Salon, the annual exhibition of artists and wannabe artists who submit work to the jury either it's selected or rejected. What is selected then is presented. It's thousands of works. And Paris is, and when Diderot is writing in the 18th century, Paris is the center of the art world. And he's writing for, his reviews were not published in Paris until after his death. It's part of a newsletter that is sent to leading families and aristocrats and rulers throughout Europe, in Russia and England and Germany, who are all very curious about what's going on in Paris in the art world. And so Diderot is writing accounts for them. They will not see the exhibition, so they are reading what they cannot see, and Diderot is painting the pictures for them, and he's choosing the work that he wants them to focus on. Painters like Chardin, for example, and Greuze, and artists that are cutting through this kind of allegorical excess and the romanticized excess that academic painting had begun to favor, with the nymphs cavorting in the forests and the various illustrations of biblical scenes that, for the philosophes and the rationalists, diverted attention away from concerns from the present, using religion, as Marx would say, as an opiate to soften the edge of lived experience, the difficulties of life. And so it's the stage of the salon is where modern art criticism is born, and the salon exhibition is a public spectacle. It's a place where the classes will come together. Usually, the exhibitions are taking place during a Catholic feast day, in which those from the country are coming into the city, and the exhibition then is one of the things that people will go to. So there's an opportunity for spectacle. There's an opportunity to use it to speak to a readership that is eager to know what is going on in the world. And this is, while Diderot is writing for the aristocrats not in Paris, Baudelaire, however, one of the founders of modern art criticism, the pioneers in the middle of the 19th century, he's writing for the Parisian writer, or the French reader. He's writing for those that are going to the show, hearing about it. And Baudelaire's criticism is a particular kind of criticism. He said that criticism had to be passionate, political, and partisan, subjective. And that's not how we think about criticism. We think about criticism as objective, of the exercise of reason, of giving you a thumbs up and a thumbs down, a separating the good from the bad. All of those judgments can take place in a stable environment in which what you are evaluating is a very narrow range of values: draftsmanship, the application of color, the subject matter, etc. And within the context of the academy and traditional training, the kind of art reviews that were taking place, within which Diderot was beginning to shape things and to move things in a different direction, Diderot was being passionate, political, and partisan in his own particular rationalistic and Enlightenment-inspired way. But if the standards are all accepted and presumed that art is X, Y, and Z, then the exercise of judgment is pretty straightforward. But in a context in which what art is changing, in which case there is going to be Baudelaire going to the salon and going to the official exhibitions, it's not going to be long before critics are going to exhibitions that are staged by artists outside the bounds of the academy, outside the realm of where art is understood as being a particular thing and serving a particular function and having particularly commonly accepted values. If the artist now, calling themselves an artist, making paintings that are operating beyond that institutional structure, what are they? What are the values? How do you determine what is good or bad? What is for example, what is a good Paul Gauguin or a good Edouard Manet? If Manet is staging his own exhibition in 1867 in opposition to the Academy, does that mean that Manet is just taking his rejected bad academic paintings? Is that what it is? Just bad academic painting? Or is it something else? And the goal of the critic was to not offer objective distance judgment like Simon Cowell in the Voice or whatever those voice competitions in which they're judging whether you're good or bad. But these critics, what Baudelaire is calling for criticism that operates as a friend to the art, as a patron to the art, as a way of showing the viewer why that art, which looks so bad, which doesn't look like the great classical and academic inspired painting, why it is worth looking at, and why it is even a more authentic expression of what Baudelaire calls modern life. What Baudelaire wants is an artist whose work comes out of the present. Not an artist who hides in the past in allegories and Judeo-Christian mythology and Christian and classical mythology and allows the viewer to take off his or her burdens and the difficulties of social and political life out in the streets in Paris and enter into this realm of art. And you can imagine that and you feel that. You go to a museum or you watch a PBS episode of an art tour and it's the British guy in the tweed jacket with the elbow patches and the classical music and somehow you've entered into another realm. That's precisely not what Baudelaire and the apologists for modern art wanted. They want the viewer to bring with them modern life and the difficulties and the challenges and the different way of experiencing the world in 19th century Paris and bringing it into the museum. And that work of art is coming out of that, out of those difficulties, those challenges. And remember, in the middle of the 19th century, you're looking at the middle of revolutionary Paris. You have the French Revolution in the 1790s. You have Napoleon taking over as emperor in 1800 and then abdicating in the first decade of the 19th century, exiled. Then you have a century of revolutions. And so everything is at play. Everything is open for discussion. How do we organize political life? How do we organize social life? What does culture mean? What's the relationship of culture to political life? And then you have the development of modernism, of industrial. You have the Industrial Revolution in London that comes to Paris. You have the transformation of Paris into a modern city, and you have the development of the middle class, the bourgeoisie, the emergence of capitalism and consumer culture. Marx is in Paris and London studying, trying to figure this out. Well, of course, art's going to be different. It needs to be different. It has to engage this. It has to be a part. Poetry and painting and music has to somehow be responsive to this. And that's what the critic is trying to do. The critic is trying to write in a way to draw attention to the fact that Gauguin's paintings or Manet's paintings are not bad paintings, bad academic paintings. They are prophetic, prescient, socially and ethically responsible paintings that are responding to the difficulties, the challenges, the opportunities of modern life. That's what the critic is trying to do. And so that shift is the critic is now a partisan. The critic is now championing the work of art, and there's no room to be objective. And so the writings that I'm asking you to read are writings like Rilke's letters to his wife, the sculptor Clara Westhoff, who's in Germany, um, where Rilke and Clara are living, and Rilke is in Paris, and he's working for Rodin, Clara's former sculptor teacher, and Rodin goes to a goes to the memorial retrospective of Paul Cézanne's paintings, and he writes Clara, who wants to be there to see those works but can't. And so Rilke is doing what Diderot is doing with the aristocracy. He's writing letters, criticism, to Clara, painting the pictures of his experience of Cézanne. And so you read these letters, which are remarkable, and I've just attached a selection, but there's a complete a publication of them that I think are remarkable for you to look at. And what Rilke is doing is tracking his experience of the work. And so instead of the critic coming to the painting and judging the work, I, as the critic, now looking at this static work, now judging whether it's good or bad, Rilke's posture, the posture of the modern critic, is it's the work that is speaking. The work is demanding something of the viewer, and the viewer now is experiencing something, learning something, changing, having to question his experience. That's a shift. Rilke's not judging. Rilke is being judged. Rilke's poem that I've attached, the torso of the classical nude. The narrator of the story is seeing this, probably the Belvedere torso, great classical torso, and he's reflecting on this torso, and the torso speaks. The work of art speaks to him, and what it says is, you must change your life. Judgment. The fact that I exist means that you must change. And so art isn't there to confirm values, confirm what we already know about the world, confirm the status quo, and confirm the power structures. The work of art exists to transform them. Now, what's also interesting with Rilke and the development of modern art is that Rilke poem is a poem about a classical sculpture. What modern art does, the emergence of modern art and modern art criticism, is it begins to reorganize how we think about art at all art. Michelangelo's paintings, Leonardo's paintings, Velázquez's paintings now become modern. They are given agency. And so instead of judging them for what they are achieving or not achieving in the transcendental abstractions of the good, the true, and the beautiful, and what good painting is supposed to be, those works in their own funky, individualistic, strange quirkiness are declaring something, a truth that is deeper than what is just seen and observed. And what happens is that work of art that looks like a kid can do it, the work of art that looks like a lousy work of art that isn't drawn well, that has garish colors, that is totally unlike an academic, classically trained artist's painting, somehow and in some way speaks truth. And it speaks truth powerfully. It's very interesting. And I would suggest to you that there's something that's based upon New Testament principles, a kind of evangelistic, gospel-based principles in which it's not the powerful, the visually powerful, the wealthy. It's in the poor, the handicapped, the destitute, the ugly, that truth lives. And so modern art criticism and modern painting become, in some ways, forms of religion, speaking truth to power, showing that it's the weak, showing it's the vulnerable, that it's what doesn't look good is actually the good. It's a very interesting turn in which the critic is saying a work of art is more than what you see. There is something else. And it's interesting that it's through our criticism often that these works of art are coming. It's through literature, it's through writing. And so now there's a new and different kind of relationship between paintings and words. If the painting is saying, look, but look deeper. Don't look with superficial eyes. Look with the eyes of faith. Believe in something more than just what you see. And the difficulty and the irony and the interest in painting is that it's operating and using a visual, an organ, your eyesight, which is nothing if not judgmental, superficial in many ways. Right? In the Gospels, the contrast to unbelief, the contrast to belief isn't unbelief, it's sight. And you begin to have artists and you begin to have critics beginning to write about belief. That the visual arts are more than what you see. And so the art criticism becomes a means of what Baudelaire says is being passionate, political, and partisan, and helping you look and see something different. And within the context of modern art, the artist is having now to set out this context for how the work of art is going to be understood. The artist in his manifesto or the artist's statement, which were never needed in the context of the academy and classical painting, because the presumptions are already there. You just operate within them. If you're operating outside of that, you have to reset that, you have to recalibrate that framework. What is the world within which, what is the context within which my paintings make sense? And the artist is doing that, and then the critics are doing that. And there'll be different contexts in which the critic sets the work in different contexts. So if these thoughts were helpful to you, have a great week. I am really looking forward to getting back into following and responding to your thinking. This is such an exciting subject, and it's broken my heart the last few weeks of not being able to be connected with you. And I look forward to this week to reconnecting with you. Have a great week.